What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and hour number 2. The phone lines are closed for the moment, and I want to get some news out of here. Now, Judicial Watch is continuing to do some excellent, excellent work, and they have obtained new records that reveal that the Obama Department of Justice was planning to seek criminal charges against Obama's opponents. And it wasn't just the Department of Justice, it was the IRS, that whole Lois Lerner thing, and the FBI. They were all being turned into weapons to be used against political targets. And that obviously is a tacky no-no under our system of government, except we have a government that just institutionally no longer feels they have to play by the rules. It's whoever's got the power, whoever has the blackmail information, whoever's got the leverage, whoever's got the money, calling the shots. The federal government is visibly fracturing before our eyes. Now, we mentioned this earlier, but we're going to mention it again. It's coming out of Blacklisted News. Apparently, National Security Agency Director Admiral Mike Rogers is seizing on this idea that Russia hacked our elections in order to argue that the intelligence agencies, the national security state, the spooks, should have direct oversight of our elections. In other words, if you think the vote rigging was bad before, this is it. We will never have another democratically elected president in this country. It'll be whoever is selected by the spook agencies to be the figurehead. And again, just like this whole idea of Russian collusion with the Trump campaign, there is no evidence that Russia interfered with our election. Nobody has found any evidence. The entire argument is, well, obviously they wanted Trump to win, so it makes sense that they did something. Go ahead and prove you're innocent. Return to Code Napoleon. You're guilty until you can prove you're innocent, and that's not how the United States is supposed to be set up. And I would like to remind everybody one more time that all of the election fraud that was detected last year all favored Hillary Clinton. Now, if you've been watching corporate media, especially Fox News, you've probably heard that Fox News former chief Roger Ailes has died at age 77. He basically resigned last summer, supposedly over accusations of sexual harassment. And he basically created the Fox News network and wrote it up there. But ever since Rupert Murdoch has taken it back, it's definitely moving away from the conservative. At this point, it's centrist, and I don't see the momentum stopping. I think Fox News is going to be just as liberal, war hawk, get Trump, as the rest of the corporate media out there. Turning to the war zones here, the U.S.-backed rebels have suffered a major setback. Syrian army troops have captured much of eastern Sweden, and that may be why the U.S. bombed the Syrian forces today. The Syrian Arab Army, alongside the National Defense Forces, resumed their offensive operations in the eastern countryside of al-Swida on today, and they apparently managed to capture 35 kilometers of rebel-held territory and doing great guns. So this may have been the reason the United States bombed a Syrian military convoy. And they're not even trying to pretend it was another accident like they've done before. The U.S. and the coalition have carried out something like 8,000 airstrikes into Syria. Oh, we're going after ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Sorry about the hospital. Didn't mean to, really. But now they're saying basically because the Syrian forces moved against the U.S.-backed forces in Syria, that the U.S. was entitled or right to attack Syria's forces. So now we're in direct conflict with Syria's government forces. It's got nothing to do with ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And as that caller mentioned, basically the United States is now ISIS Air Force. And we do have boots on the ground in Syria as well. It's only a matter of time before we go up head-to-head against the Russians. That's where this is going. Russia will not allow the United States to basically conquer Syria. Meanwhile, thousands of Hezbollah forces deployed at Al-Tanf to foil the U.S. plot in Syria. Now, as you know, the U.S. put some 3,000 forces in Al-Tanf to create a security buffer zone where the U.S.-backed rebels could hide out in safety and basically say, go attack, come on back. If Syria comes into the buffer zone, we'll drive them away. And apparently the Hezbollah forces are being a major headache to that. They don't want any safety buffer zones. They realize it's the first step to the Balkanization of Syria to create the new Kurdistan. We're going to do a quick shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. We're talking about the war zones. And once again, there is the use of poison gas in the war zones. Apparently, ISIL is now using poison gas to slow the advance of Iraq's troops in Mosul. Where's the hue and cry from the media? Oh, when they thought it was Assad at Idlib, oh, it was front page news. Nope, hardly a mention here. And of course the question is, where did they get these chemical weapons? They're not exactly easy to make. You can't go down to the longs and pick up a few chemicals and mix something. Trump's advisors now want at least 50,000 U.S. troops in Afghanistan. They are not able to get that country under control. They have the oil pipeline right-of-way under control. They have the opium poppies under control. But the Taliban is still actually de facto in charge of much of that country, especially toward the east. So they're having to escalate in there. They've gotten into these messes they can't get out. And this is what happened to the Soviet Union. They got caught in a war of attrition in Afghanistan, and it just ground them down until finally, as part of perestroika, the Soviet Union pulled them out of Afghanistan. And that was the end of the Soviets' myth of military invincibility. And all of the socialist republics started breaking away. And that was the end of the Soviet Union and the beginning of the Russian republics. Now, here's a very cautioning article from commondreams.org. The U.S. will never win the war in Afghanistan. Remember, the last military commander who actually succeeded in conquering all of Afghanistan and hanging on to it was Alexander the Great, and he only kept it for 3 years. So this article is basically saying the U.S. is pouring your tax money into a corrupt sewer. The World Justice Project's 2016 Rule of Law Index ranked Afghanistan 111 out of 113 countries assessed, meaning there are only 2 more countries more corrupt than Afghanistan. The money is pouring on in, and it vanishes into people's private account. And despite all the U.S. arms, aid, and training, its divided and demoralized security forces are unable to stand up to the Taliban. Remember, Afghanistan is called the graveyard of empires. Certainly was true in the case of the Soviet Union, certainly true in the case of Great Britain, and it looks like it could very well be true for the United States of America. Now, down in the Gulf area, the Gulf states are looking at what Israel is doing, its belligerence, its aggressiveness, and they've offered to come up with a solution. They're willing to make a deal. The Gulf states are saying to Israel they will normalize ties, encourage trade, travel, let's all be friends, in exchange for a partial freeze on the building of illegal settlements, which sounds like a really, really good deal. And along with the freezing, the settlement construction in parts of the West Bank also involves easing trade restrictions in the Gaza Strip. Sounds very good to me. Sounds fair. It sounds just. It sounds practical, which is why Israel's never going to go for it. Meanwhile, over in the Negev, Israel has raised a Palestinian village for the 113th time. And basically, they keep going on into this village, Arakib. They'll bulldoze it flat. They'll leave. The Palestinians will come back and rebuild. They've been through this 113 times. And basically they're shacks, so it's easy to put them back up again. But that's what's going on. Now, here is a warning sign about what's going to happen in South America. And when I read this story, I flashed back to the movie Avatar, where our hero in the wheelchair is just starting to get to know his commanding officer. And the commanding officer says, I saw your record. You were in Venezuela. That was some mean bush. And you start to wonder, wow, Cameron knew what was happening here. We know that Venezuela has been the target of U.S. covert action, going all the way back to Hugo Chavez. They tried to get a coup to get him out of power. Actually got him out of office for about a week, I think. Heavy economic warfare, all over the fact that Venezuela wants to sell their oil for currencies other than the U.S. dollar. They've been selling much of their oil to China for the yuan. And even worse, under Hugo Chavez, they took all that oil money and they spent it on the people of the country. Horror of horrors. That's a bad example for all the other countries. So they've been wanting to get Venezuela under control. And as you know, there's rioting going on down there. Looks like another color revolution, destabilization. And now, here we go. The United States has gone into the UN Security Council saying the Venezuela crisis has reached the point where an intervention is needed to prevent a new Syria. And Nikki Haley's over there saying that the U.S. intention wasn't to be intrusive or heavy-handed, which is what they said when they were going in, but to support regional efforts to find a political solution, meaning they're going to find somebody who will do what they're told and put him into power. So yeah, Venezuela is now going to be getting the Americanization treatment. Story out of FFF.org. The Batinsky should butt out of Korea. And we're hearing all this talk about nuclear weapons and missiles, and again, looking at the U.S. aggressions over the last, going on 20 years, and covertly before that, since the end of World War II. The U.S. has tried to covertly change the government of some 50 countries, and they've succeeded about half the time. Korea was something that we never should have gotten involved in the first place because it was a civil war. And the U.S. has kept a force of 23,000 American soldiers stationed in South Korea, ever since. And this Korean Civil War is a half-century old. I hope that South Korea's new president is able to carry through with his promise to reach across the DMZ and shake Kim Jong-un's hand and say, let's stop all this nonsense. Let's officially end the Korean War and talk about reunification. The U.S. doesn't want that, though. Meanwhile, and this is something we need to keep an eye on, Russia is stepping up to help North Korea in order to constrain the United States. Now, as you know, the United States has been throwing sanctions all over North Korea, and even China has gone along with some of these, you know, to punish North Korea for building weapons that would prevent us from invading whenever we feel like it. And Russia is now increasing fuel exports to North Korea and filling in the supply gap created by China halting trade. So Russia is stepping on in, and that means that North Korea is going to be very friendly with Russia, as opposed to the United States. And emphasizing this new closeness, a tourist ferry has just opened between North Korea and Russia's Vladivostok. And it's already had its one crossing to sort of inaugurate the service, and they had representatives of Chinese and Russian tourism companies. And they're going to start regular service next week. Passenger connection between the two countries. That's how it's supposed to be done. Peace through commerce, cooperation. Let's be friends and do business. Let's just wag our missiles at each other and force them to buy things they don't want to buy. Now, another issue here is apparently a company called SRE Minerals has announced the discovery in North Korea of what is believed to be the largest deposit of rare earth elements anywhere in the world. And that right there is a good reason for an invasion, because those rare earth elements are critical to the manufacture of modern electronics. And they're not that common. A lot of them are in China. China right now has an almost monopolistic control on the rare earth elements. So if the U.S. were to invade North Korea and capture that deposit, then obviously more of those rare earth elements would be available to U.S. corporations at a lower price. But that's a real prize right there, those rare earth elements. Now, if you're my age, you remember the Cuban Missile Crisis. And it was precipitated when the United States put nuclear-tipped long-range missiles in Turkey to threaten the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union responded by placing missiles on the island of Cuba, also nuclear, also long-range. And it led to a standoff between Khrushchev and Kennedy that brought us to the brink of a nuclear exchange with the Soviet Union. Fortunately, cooler heads prevailed. Kennedy and Khrushchev knew for a fact that their counterpart did not want to push that button, and they were able to avoid making that big mistake. And Khrushchev took the missiles out of Cuba. The U.S. pulled some, not all of their missiles out of Turkey. And Kennedy promised Khrushchev there would be no more invasions of Cuba. This was after the Bay of Pigs fiasco. So there's another article out here from Sputnik News saying we're on the verge of the American missile crisis because the U.S. is planting missiles all over the world. THAAD, along with the existing strategic forces, the submarines, and the rest of it, there's a new missile crisis coming, and it's being created by the military-industrial complex, because the more they can convince the government to put missiles in other countries, the more missiles will have to be bought and manufactured. And now we're in a situation where the leaders of other countries aren't really certain about the sanity of our political leadership. There are too many of them out there saying, yeah, let's just go ahead and nuke Russia and get it over with. Again, coming from Paul Craig Roberts. This is a very, very, very dangerous time, and the future of all humanity, unfortunately, is in the hands of whichever world leader is the least mentally stable. And with the possible exception of Vladimir Putin, pretty much all of them would look much better in a straitjacket, as far as I can tell. Okay, article here. This is coming out of Global Research. Armed drones, America's favorite weapon, blurring the line between warfare and assassination. And yes, that has been a problem, because the U.S. has a bad habit of sending these drones into countries with which we are not actually at war, countries that have not done anything to us, and they blow people up. And they have not been very careful about picking their targets. They profile extremely tall men. They're likely to be part of the terrorist group, and that led to a tragedy. Because one of the drones saw this crowd of people in the street, and there was one tall figure in the middle, and they figured, oh, gotta be a terrorist. And they struck the crowd, and it turned out to be a school class with their teacher. And they were all blown to bloody bits. So there is an area of concern. Are these, in fact, war crimes being committed? The United States, under international law, does not actually have a right to fly drones into other people's countries and kill people. They're able to do it, and from that they're going to say, well, if we can, then we will, and nobody can stop us. But you need to look at the morality of that. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to talk about the economy now. As you know, the stock markets took a major hit yesterday. They blamed it all on the uncertainty over Donald Trump. And the markets climbed back a little bit today. Middle of the day, it looked like they were going to go back up, and then toward the end of the day, slid back off again. I think people are really starting to look about where their investments are and whether they should go on following the cheerleaders with the flag saying the economy is really good, or if it's time for an honest assessment of what their investments really are worth when they look at the numbers for themselves here. Interestingly enough, over in Italy, Deutsche Bank is being sued for running a, quote, international criminal organization. And apparently they've been accused and found guilty of rigging and manipulating virtually every possible asset class. And so it was inevitable that Deutsche Bank, which is already on trial in Milan for helping Banca Monte dei Paschi conceal losses, that happened last October, and now they're facing accusations it was actually running an international criminal organization, committing all this fraud. Yeah, sounds like it to me. Now, over in Greece, things are really, really bad. The Greek people are absolutely opposed to any more austerity, which is the people make do with less so the bankers can have more. And apparently the protesters are being joined by the police, fire brigades, and even the Coast Guard. And the only ones who are still trying to protect the Greek parliament are the special riot police units. So we could see something dramatic happen there very, very quickly. All right, let's see. We're going to grab ourselves a phone call. Glenn in Philadelphia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. The Pentagon has consented to accept the return of the THAAD missile systems from South Korea, but they have to charge a 15% restocking fee, and they'll have to be sold as refurbs. Those interested in pricing and availability information can find it at www.missilesrus.com.
Oh, that's funny. That is funny. So they are taking the THAAD out of South Korea.
No,
you just made that up. Okay. Well, because the new South Korean president wants the U.S. to pull all their troops and weapons and everything out. He's saying we can take care of our own defense. We're going to make friends with North Korea. We don't need all this stuff here. And so that's going to be very, very awkward for the United States, which is openly hostile to North Korea, to all of a sudden start being openly hostile to South Korea, because South Korea doesn't want to go along with the war agenda. But if South Korea is pulling out of that, the U.S. doesn't really have any kind of a justification for being over there.
Right. Well, isn't that what Jesus said? Curse those blasted peacemakers, or something like that.
I think it was blessed be the cheesemakers.
Blessed are the peacemakers. Yeah. It's always that's all that fine print always gets you.
Yes.
You know? All right, Mike. That's all I had. Take care.
All right. Thanks an awful lot here. And yes, the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, apparently, there's been a bit of a whoopsie over in China, just by way of sharing the fact that bankers are going to behave like bankers anywhere in the world. And apparently at China's Mingsheng Bank, the country's largest private bank, apparently lost 3 trillion yuan. And basically it turned out bank employees had engaged in fraud and embezzled the funds. They never invested the money. They had basically put the money into cultural relics and jewelry for their own use. So there's a big stink brewing over there. Everywhere in the world you go, the bankers are going to be the bankers are going to be the bankers. Meanwhile, over in California, Governor Jerry Brown is slamming taxpayers as being freeloaders because they're against higher taxation. What's wrong with you? You should love your higher taxes. We're all taxed way too much, and the money does not come back to benefit us. Goes to the war machine, goes to the refugees, the illegal immigrants, Israel. It doesn't come back to us, and that is a major problem. We'll be right back after these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go back to the phones here. Kathleen in Paris, thank you for waiting so patiently, and what is on your mind?
Kathleen in Paris, thank you for waiting. What is on your mind? Kathleen in Paris, thank you for waiting.
Okay, we seem to have an echo. Please turn down the speaker on your computer.
Yeah.
You're there. Okay, good.
Yeah, I did. I just did that. 2 things, Michael. You already spoke about the White House personnel director. What's his name?
I'd have to go back.
Anyway,
I'd have to go back and look at that.
But never mind. He's filling the White House with bad people. But in 4 days, supposedly in 4 days, I read somewhere that I can't quote, but on the 22nd, he's planning a major purge of Trump supporters. Yeah,
they were brought in during the transition, and they have very limited contracts, and the contracts are expiring. This director of personnel has the option to renew them, and apparently he's not going to. He's literally trying to get the White House purged of anybody who might actually be on Donald Trump's side. Trump's got to be feeling like a very lonely man right now. He's surrounded on all sides by people who are enemies of him. And that, again, he's made so many mistakes, and at this point it may be irretrievable.
The other thing is I have an article by Wayne Madsen. He's got this Strategic Culture Foundation, and I subscribe to that. And it's about Macron, the new president, and he's calling him an American Trojan horse in the Élysée Palace. It took me many years to be able to say that, so I hope you can appreciate the Élysée Palace. Anyway, that when Macron was in the ministry of the President Hollande, that he was instrumental in American companies taking over French companies, French industry and whatnot. So it's like the globalization thing, right?
Yes. Well, again, what the globalists want is to partition the earth into these various regions, and each region is responsible for one area of economic activity. All the farming will be over here, all the electronics will be over here, all the cars will be over here, all the clothing manufacturing over here, with the idea that the globe is now dependent on the rest of the globe. And that is going to be an impediment to nations going back to being sovereign nations. Now, because of all the sanctioning activity that's been going on, especially up in Russia, is they're redeveloping their ability to take care of their economic needs internally, domestically. And they're bringing back industries that have been allowed to fade away because of offshoring. And we should be doing the same thing here in the United States, but unfortunately the H-1Bs and the offshoring are continuing. Because they're trying to basically drive all of electronics into India and China, and I don't know what they're planning on having the U.S. being. It certainly isn't going to be the breadbasket to the world that it was back in the 1960s, because nobody wants our GMO agriculture.
Right. Well, yes, I just thought I would throw in 2 cents about the French president. Being on board with globalization. And
well, I mean, look how overt they were in stealing the election from Marine Le Pen. It's almost like we've reached a point where they're not even really trying to hide it. It'll just be there in your face, and this is just the new reality. You're all required to vote, but it doesn't really mean anything.
I saw a video where somebody against Marine Le Pen. I don't know, I don't vote here, so I don't know quite how it works, but evidently you go into the voting place and there's ballots there, and if you want to vote for Le Pen, there's a stack of ballots for Le Pen, and you pick one up and go. And there was a video of some guy just grabbing all of them and taking them out, so nobody could vote for Le Pen.
Yes, and there was the postal ballots, because under French law, a ballot that is torn is considered spoiled and cannot be counted. And apparently, French voters who were voting by mail, they would get the envelope from the polling place, and Macron's ballot was perfectly intact, and the ones for Marine Le Pen, they were all torn. And there were like tens of thousands of these spoiled ballots sent on out, and the number of spoiled ballots actually exceeded the number of votes that Marine Le Pen actually received. Clearly, that could have shifted the election right there. but we've started seeing the emergence of massive election fraud all across the globe. Scottish independence referendum, a lot of election fraud in Brexit, didn't quite get where they wanted to go. A lot of election fraud in this country last year. They didn't get where they wanted to go, and maybe that's why the NSA and CIA now want to take more direct control of the election system, because by golly, when we rig an election, it stays rigged.
You know, I'm pretty dismayed, and, you know, I live here for many years. I'm an English teacher. I have a lot of French friends, and I don't know one who is awake. They, you know, they're all like, oh, Macron, he's going to save us now.
Yeah, well.
Like, you know, we thought. And it's very depressing.
It is, and I hope your friends will start to wake up, because if the United States succeeds in getting into a war with Russia, part of it is going to be fought on your land again. Just like World War I, just like World War II.
Yes. Yes, I have some who are awake and listening to me, but some who, you know, I'm in danger of losing the friendship.
Well, there's a lot of people who are, they're still in denial. They start to think about what might be happening, and it's so scary they just shut off and say, I don't want to know. I'm going to be, you know, I'm just going to mind my own business, and the world will leave me alone. And unfortunately, it never works out that way. Okay?
Yes, they quote Voltaire to me, that we should just tend our own garden, you know.
Well, yeah, until the tank rolls over it. All right, well, Kathleen, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. Getting on back to the economy, Ellen Brown came out with a wonderful article, and it's called, If China Can Fund Infrastructure with Its Own Credit, So Can We. And they're talking, she's talking about how in China, infrastructure is built at virtually zero cost in terms of the money, because the Chinese government owns the majority of its banks, and about 40% of the funding for its giant railway project comes from bonds issued by the Ministry of the Railway. 10 to 20% comes from provincial and local governments, and the remaining 40 to 50% is provided by loans from government-owned banks and financial institutions. And like private banks, state-owned banks simply create money as credit on their books. The difference is that they return their profits to the government, making the loans essentially interest-free, and the loans can be rolled over indefinitely. In effect, the Chinese government decides what work it wants done, draws on its own national credit card, pays Chinese workers to do it, and repays the loans with the proceeds. This was the system that the United States started with. It's the system Canada used to have. And it's a system that works. And by the way, next Wednesday, we'll have Ellen Brown on our show to talk about this and other issues of banking, state banking versus private banking. Cisco has announced 1,100 more layoffs. Their business continues to dwindle, which strikes me as odd, because right now I think Cisco would be seeing a need to go back in and reverse engineer some of their routers to make them more secure, because apparently some of these routers are also wide open to some of these ransomwares. And we know the routers are backdoored by the NSA anyway. Bad news all over. Ford's letting people go. We're still seeing these commercials. In fact, not just on TV. I'm getting email pitches for, you know, buying a car, and the prices are amazing. The prices are absolutely amazing. And boy, I could use a new car. Newer. But nobody has any money, and that's the big, ugly, dark secret nobody wants to look at. Working and middle-class people do not have any money left to pour back into the system and keep it going. All righty, let's see. We're going to talk to Linda in Massachusetts. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I hate to ask you to repeat something, but the female caller before me, and you were talking about somebody going to purge the Trump supporters out of the White House or something. I didn't quite follow it.
Okay, well, basically what it is some of the White House staff were hired on short-term contracts as part of the transition, and their contracts are due to expire on the 22nd. And so this director of personnel inside the White House apparently is following a policy of not allowing Trump supporters to get jobs in the White House. He has been bringing in people opposed to Trump and literally building an anti-Trump staff around the president in order to paralyze and hamstring him. And apparently on this purge, he's not going to renew any of these contracts held by Trump supporters, and he's going to replace them. Again, they're literally creating a White House staff around him that is hostile to everything the president is doing. It is a coup d'etat. It's a palace revolt.
It is.
It's a palace revolt.
It's obviously a coup d'etat. Mike, what is this gentleman's position in the White House? He's
director of personnel. His name is DiStefano, and
DiStefano. Okay.
Yeah, he's the director of personnel. And again, Trump made a big mistake allowing some of these Obama holdovers to stay on, because Trump comes from the world of business. And in the world of business, when you are signing somebody's paycheck, you basically can assume safely their primary loyalty is to you. But that's not how Washington, D.C. works. And even all the way back when Trump was first starting to run, and Governor Chris Christie was trying to surround him with all of these neocons. And then he brought in Reince Priebus to be the White House chief of staff. And Priebus is just bringing in the GOP old guard. And Trump is simply outnumbered, and they've got him running around in circles with all this nonsense about Russiagate, and he's paralyzed. He can't function. He can't implement his agenda, which will be seen by the general population as a failure.
His deficit is his non-political experience, not being a political animal. Something that drives me crazy. Do you mind if I mention something else with the Seth Rich and the original Russia collusion story?
Sure.
It's been bothering me from the beginning that the release date of the WikiLeaks was prior to the Democrat National Convention, which, if the media had carried it at all, would have boosted Bernie's chances.
Yes.
To change some of the delegates. So the theory that we're having invested, we're going to spend millions and millions of dollars, and all these people are going to get their names in the papers and all this recognition, and the theory is broken. It doesn't make sense that Russia would try to help Bernie Sanders beat Hillary Clinton. It makes no sense.
The story doesn't make sense anyway. First of all, it's the United States that has a history of going on out and interfering with other nations' elections, at least 81 times that we know of, and there's probably more beyond that. And second, all of the election fraud that was actually found favored Hillary Clinton. And yet the story we're getting is Russia tampered with our election to get Donald Trump elected. It really doesn't make sense. But they're just screaming it at everybody from all the corporate media in the hopes that people will just say, all right, I'll stop thinking for myself, stop screaming at me.
It's also a theory that was presented by our intelligence services that there's no substance to the theory. It just makes no sense.
No, it makes no sense. And even the leaked emails from within the Hillary campaign are saying they came up with this Russia influenced the election after Hillary lost. They just said, we're going to blame it on Russia. Let's go after Russia. Russia bad, Russia bad. And very obviously within our entire government, there is an attempt to demonize Russia and bring back a new Cold War in order to soak the American people for money, for more weapons and bombs and bullets and everything like the old Cold War.
So the blaming Russia thing gives them, two big bonuses. One is to keep the Russia demonization, theme going, and two is to completely deflect the crimes that were exposed by the DNC and Hillary.
Exactly.
Just deflect everything off of Hillary and keep their warmongering marching on.
I'm forgetting who it was. There was somebody in the corporate media, one of the talking heads, actually came out and said, if you actually read those DNC emails, you're helping Russia. And that's how afraid they were that people were going to read them. But enough people did read them and just saw Bernie Sanders got robbed. He got robbed of the nomination. Right. The DNC basically said, we're going to give it to Hillary Clinton. We don't care what the rank-and-file Democratic voters want. We have already decided it will be Hillary Clinton, and she will power on through into the White House. Only they came up short on the election fraud.
Maybe Russia wanted Bernie to be the president because he's a socialist. That must have been it.
Well,
I mean, they did. I'm kidding, Mike.
Yeah, there's no evidence that Russia did anything in our election.
Right. I get that.
Yeah.
But so the theory that Russia and Trump colluded to help Bernie makes no sense. The theory that we're going to spend millions of dollars to investigate. There's nothing there, and there has never been anything there.
This is not an investigation. This is political theater. That's what's going on right now all over the TVs. It's political theater. Oh, yeah, the mere suspicion that this happened is grounds to remove Donald Trump. It is a witch hunt. It's a smear job. It's McCarthyism all over again. And it could just spin dangerously out of control. All right, well, listen, Linda, thank you very much. We're going to start with Mike in Arizona. I'm probably going to have to take you through the commercial break. What's on your mind?
Yes, I'd like to say yesterday was the 30th anniversary of the attack on the USS Stark that killed 37 Navy personnel in the Persian Gulf. And, you know, it's just unfortunate in a lot of the Patriot or parrot radios with the networks and the hosts that all of a sudden all they want to do is talk about Seth Ridge and Robert Mueller and Russian hacking and just the same thing. It doesn't matter what network, who you're listening to or whatever is going on. That seems to be all we hear. But nobody took 30 seconds out of their busy day yesterday to remind us that 37 Navy personnel were vaporized on the USS Stark. And it's just a sad commentary in today's world that we can just sit here and talk over and over again about stuff that they've already admitted didn't exist.
Okay, we're going to have to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And during the commercial break, I'm reading the Wikipedia article on the USS Stark incident, where apparently during the Iran-Iraq war, the Stark was patrolling an exclusionary area there in the Persian Gulf and was attacked with 2 Exocet missiles from an Iraqi aircraft. And it doesn't really say whether it was intentional or mistaken identity. But what's really interesting is apparently Ronald Reagan tried to imply that Iran was to blame for the attack. You know, Iraq's our friend. Iraq would never. And so a little more skullduggery on that. Okay, back to the phones. Andrea in Oklahoma. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes. There's a saying that you usually use that if my vote didn't count, then I don't owe this government anything. If it's been stolen away from me, if I found that this government hasn't allowed me to vote the way for who I have chosen to be president, and that they don't recognize me, then I don't have to recognize that this is a legitimate government, and then I don't have to pay the taxes, and I don't have to do anything. And yes, our governor here in Oklahoma has said we can't get out and demonstrate. There's huge fines now if we do. But this is definitely something where we've got to do something about taking our government back. This is ridiculous. And all these things where they make up these new rules or change these ideas that there is no constitution, you don't have any rights anymore, and somebody else is going to make decisions, that is just outrageous.
I agree.
And yes, we are all shaking our hands and saying, I'm mad as you know what, and I'm not going to take it anymore. I'm not going to just sit here but I want to go somewhere it's going to mean something. I mean, people en masse holding up signs and stopping traffic and getting in the way and shutting down this government. We've got to take back our government, and to heck with what they're saying, and for sure, we've got to get with it. I mean, I know that you're wanting to wait till it falls apart, but it just seems like it's grinding on and on and on, and it's like we've got to stop it now almost.
I understand your anger. I hear so much of it. I get so much of it in my email. I hear the anger is out there, and it is definitely growing. We're seeing a lot of road rage here where we live. The fact that there are people in the streets clashing with each other, It does feel like the entire nation is within a hair's breadth of a complete societal breakdown, rioting in the streets, civil war, revolution. And again, I don't want to see it, but at this point I have to concede it could very well happen, and there's nothing I can do to stop it. But again, revolution against the government gives them the justification to declare national emergency, toss what's left of the Constitution into the shredder, and declare a new tyrannical Fourth Reich. Anyway, listen, Andrea, thanks a lot for the call. We're going to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back.